Hello, grade 12s. Welcome to today's lesson. It's Economics with me, Spiwe. Today we are going to learn about evaluating the South African approaches that are used in South Africa. Remember, on our previous lesson, we looked at the South African approach in terms of the supply side approach and also in terms of the demand side approach. So now we are going to combine these two approaches and then we're going to look at them from a South African perspective. So let's get started with our lesson. So we are doing the evaluation of the South African approaches used in South Africa. That refers to the demand side approach and the supply side approach, looking at monetary and fiscal policy and also using the microeconomic objectives in order to achieve this. So we are looking at growth and development. So what are the policies that are used in terms of growth and development? Okay, so I'm going to show you this table that I've got here, and then we are going to discuss some of the policies in terms of growth and development, looking at some of the macroeconomic policies and also looking at development policies as well. So let's get started. So these include okay, so here's my table. So these include measures to achieve the following macro objectives. So these are the macro objectives. Please do know them. They're very important to know. The fact that we want to have higher economic growth, high levels of employment, price stability, exchange rate stability, and also economic equity. So we call these the macro economic objectives because we want to have higher economic growth and we want to see our economy growing, hence it falls under growth. But in order for this to happen, we want to see high levels of employment, not high levels of unemployment. Remember, our unemployment is sitting at around 26%, so plus minus 26%. This is not good at all. This is quite a high level rate of unemployment. So all these things need to be reviewed when looking at these macroeconomic policies. Price stability will help us to control inflation and also the exchange rate stability in terms of the rand when we benchmark it against other currencies, and also economic equity as well. Now, remember, increased economic growth leads to more tax revenue, which can be used to provide more social goods and services with the aim of achieving economic development. All right, so when we've got increased economic growth, it means that there will be more income tax revenue that gets collected by government because there are more people that are employed and therefore pay income tax, and then that money can be used for more social goods and services, which will help us to achieve economic development. Okay, so we're looking at growth. So the last point that we're going to look at, all of the above measures should be evaluated in terms of international benchmarks. Okay, it's all good that we've got our own policies over here, but we need to benchmark them in terms of the international level or standards because we work or we are part of the global society. Okay, so it's important that we do the benchmark in order to see where we are in terms of other developing countries and also to compare ourselves with developed countries so that we can learn a thing or two from them and bring it onto our own economy so that we can make sound economic decisions. So that's all about growth, and now we move on to development. So the development policies that we're going to look at. So these include measures aimed at achieving industrial, agricultural, and human development. These are important sectors because if we have more activity happening in the industrial sector, in agricultural sector, and also human development in terms of upskilling people with the right skills and expertise that they need in order to participate in economic activity. So that will all happen here under these development policies. So the first point is the microeconomic initiatives. facilitating increased competition. We know that competition is a healthy aspect of an economy because now this is based on the market forces of supply and demand. So it is a good thing to have competition, opening up resource markets, not that they just limited to one particular group or to the rich and not to the poor, but they should be opened up to all members of society, enabling land use and environmental policies to be effective. So that will be part of the microeconomic initiatives under this sector. Social care is our next point. Social care and security and poverty alleviation are important things that fall under social care, because we said, we are still dealing with high levels of poverty in our country because of our high levels of unemployment. And hence you have so many people that live under the breadline and they are classified to be poor. So the poverty alleviation is part of the development policies that we have in our country. And then we have policies to redress the past inequalities, including Employment Equity Act and Black Economic Empowerment and Broad Black-based Economic Empowerment, the triple BEE. We also have affirmative action, the land redistribution and restitution. The other one looks at giving back the land that was taken based on discrimination back to its original owners, but also here we are distributing the land to allow more people to have access to the mainstream economic activities. And then also under macroeconomics initiatives, we have certain desired outcomes that we want to achieve, which is the standard of living, unemployment, and then also productivity. Okay, so we know that this will increase per capita income and then create more employment by offering more opportunities in the public sector, have a work program of some sort, and in terms of productivity, improve the level of knowledge and skills and motivation that is needed in order to participate in economic activity. So we've looked at some macroeconomic policies in terms of growth and also the development policies in terms of economic development. We will go into much more detail and look at specific policies that were introduced by government in order to meet its micro and macroeconomic objectives. All right, so, and then let's move on. So at certain periods, the South African government has focused its initiatives because they've had different initiatives on economic growth, while at other points, policies with emphasis or policy emphasis has shifted to economic development. Okay, so there are times in the economic period where the government said, you know what, we need to spend more time looking at economic growth because we need to grow our economy. We need to show that there is more increased productivity that happens. The capacity of our economy needs to grow. And then, but there were also times where they were focusing on economic development. And then this table is going to help us to understand the different policies or initiatives that the government introduced in order to achieve economic growth and economic development. So dating back is 1992, we had the IMS that was introduced, and then in 1994, RDP came in with the Reconstruction Development Program. And then in 1996, we had the GEAR that looked at, creating more employment and also, but economic activity happening. And then we had the BEE that was introduced, and ASGISA was also introduced in 2005. Then we had GIPSA, and then we also had NGP in 2012. So you would see that at different levels, government had a different plan, whether they wanted to focus on economic growth or they wanted to focus on development. So, for example, when they were looking at the Reconstruction and Development Program, so there was an element of development that they wanted to emphasize on. When they were looking at the BEE, there was a level of economic growth that they wanted to increase by using the redistribution policies in order to achieve this. So it depends on the time frame and the objectives that the government is wanting to achieve. And then they will use those in order to carry out their mandate of economic growth and development as well. Right, so the main growth and development policies are, so now we are going to focus on the main policies in terms of growth and development. I mentioned RDP just now in our previous slide, which is the Reconstruction and Development Program. So this was quite a popular program in the early 90s, around about 1994. People were talking about this RDP, and hence we were talking about the RDP houses that the government was going to build for the residents of South Africa in order to give them the ownership of property. So that would have been done through the RDP policies. So what is RDP all about? So this is the main strategy. Okay, so it is the main strategy. So the main strategy was to alleviate poverty and address the inequalities and the shortfalls in social services by focusing on job creation, welfare, housing, transport, land, which is land reform, and healthcare as well. Education was also an important part of this. Okay, so I'm just going to put, there we are. Okay, so housing, transport, land reform, healthcare, education, training, water, and sanitation. So these were the important issues around this policy because it wanted to address the inequalities that exist in society and also the shortfalls in terms of service delivery and by focusing on job creation and welfare and housing and so on. So that was the main strategy of this policy, which is called the RDP. So now let's evaluate this policy, because remember we said we are looking or we are doing an evaluation of the South African approach. So let's evaluate the policy and see if it has been effective or it had brought about the change that it wanted to bring in the lives of ordinary South Africans. So let's just chat about that. So we're looking at the evaluation. So meeting basic need basic needs, government creates, okay, so there we are. So government creates an increased demand for goods and services. The expanded public works program were mostly labor intense. So this helped to alleviate unemployment and poverty slightly though. Okay, so it didn't have a huge impact in terms of reducing the levels of unemployment and also alleviating poverty in our society. So there was a slight improvement that the policy brought into the lives of South Africans, because there were some changes because of the labor-intense markets that its programs achieved. But other than that, there wasn't a huge improvement in terms of service delivery and infrastructure and reducing the unemployment rate. Some social achievements, the building of the houses. So we did see that, and providing clean water. We saw that more South Africans had or now have access to clean water, and also electricity in some of the areas. When you look at communities like Orange Farm, when they started that as a community, there was no clean water or electricity in those areas. But you look at that environment now, and you can see that the people have basic access to the basic needs. So there are some social achievements that were achieved in terms of the building of the houses. And on our previous lesson, we spoke about the introduction of the tender system into our society, that its initial phase was not so good because people were not, well clued up in terms of how the tenders work, and there was a misuse of funds and all sorts of things, and that resulted in projects not completed, and government had to pay other construction companies to complete those projects, and it did hold back the pace and the time allocation that the government had designed for these projects. And in land reform and health, also we've seen a bit of this, and the healthcare facility has improved. You go to a public hospital and you can see that there's more staff that's been employed and so on. So you should be able to do some evaluations as well based on your experiences. Then the real GDP growth was erratic since 1994. Unemployment in formal sector increased. Okay, so there were ups and downs. There were some social achievements, but then the unemployment in the formal sector, we saw that it increased. So the key objectives of poverty reduction and improved service delivery hardly successful, because these are still the issues that ordinary South Africans are still battling with, because you look at the issue of service delivery, it's still a big issue in our country, and also the poverty reduction that was not really achieved, because you still have a lot of South Africans that still live under the breadline. So the project or the program itself or the policy itself had some wonderful objectives, but I think the implementation itself was a huge challenge, and that hence it resulted in the slight improvement in terms of the key objectives that the policy had. And also we can see that we are still, battling with these issues of poverty reduction and also issues around service delivery in our country. All right, so before we continue, let's take a short break, and I will see you right after this.